The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
This is episode 103, and it is 54 days till the man burns as of this recording. If you're making it out to the playa this year, make sure to check in at burnermap.com. One of my final stops before I leave default world is usually to print my burner map at whatever FedEx is on the way. I was about to call it Kinko's and age myself. But yeah, I print my burner map so I can set intentions to find friends throughout the week, with which I have like a 43% success rate, which isn't bad. You know, we don't always connect because Burning Man, but it does feel so fucking good to come back to camp and have campmates say, "Hey, Arash, some people came looking for you." And by their tone, I can usually assume that it wasn't law enforcement, so it really does make one's day. And point being, I'll be camped with my San Diego Art Support Crew. We are known as ASAP. We don't know what that stands for. And we'll be at 745 and C, which I guess is Cubit this year. So 745 and C, please do swing by and say hi. I'd love to meet you. Absolutely, come by. I'll either be super happy to meet you, but also be like super happy to just bug my campmates with people constantly dropping by. But for today's episode, though, let's get it. We're here. We're episode 103. For today's episode, we're going back to the end of the world on the other side of the planet for another Africa Burn episode. At Africa Burn, a lot of people who, by the way, this is an interesting experience that I had. A lot of people who've never even been to the Gerlach Regional use terminology and phrases that we're used to hearing at Burning Man proper. Like playa, dust storm, all this stuff. It's very, very similar words are constantly being thrown around, similar complaints, if you will. For those of you unacquainted, Africa Burn is the largest regional in the world, and it is laid out a lot like the original Burning Man, but everything's a little offish. Center Camp is called Off-Center Camp. The streets are 3-ish, 4-ish, 5-ish. It does feel like you're going back in time to like the mid-90s. At Burning Man. It's just like the same layout, smaller. It's super trippy. And a lot of people kept referring to the open area right outside the main city, which we normally refer to as Open Playa, as Playa, which, important clarification, it is not Playa. I am one of those people. It is called Binnikrin, I think. You'll hear Mike, our guest today, call me out on that specifically. For me personally, walking through Africa Burn's version of A Street was like the biggest mindfuck. It fully felt, smelled, and sounded like I was at Nevada Burning Man. But I wasn't. And it wasn't Nevada. And to top it all off, by the way, you look up at the sky and you can see the Milky Way in all its glory, which was just awe-inspiring. Really, truly amazing. If you want to get to know the history of Africa Burn, check out episode 100 of this show, our centennial. Is that what it is? That episode was more like an overall portrait of Africa Burn. We got into like the founding of the event and the larger socio-political implications of a movement like Burning Man on South Africa as a country. But today's episode is a deeper dive into the actual experience. I feel like we're going more into like the street level view of Africa Burn. What it's like to actually live in Tankwa Town and really be in the trenches building art in the South African desert. Today's guest was the lead builder of Africa Burn 2019's main effigy, which is known as the Sand Clan. Today's guest is Mr. Mike Rule. Mike's family founded Camp Sunset Oasis, which is the longest running camp at Africa Burn. He's been in a lead builder and or artist designer position on multiple Sand Clans, their version of the man, and has attended every single Africa Burn. So to say that he's all in is a nice little understatement. I had I had the wonderful opportunity to actually camp with Sunset Oasis, which shared camp space with the clan build team, because Mike was kind of sort of running both. Our camp lead was, of course, Paul, my amazing friend who hosted me and got me out to South Africa. But it just really could not have been any more perfect for my Africa Burn experience to be like smack right in the middle of the longest running camp there, as well as like the build team for their version of the man, the Sand Clan. You're going to hear me gush about Mike's family a lot. He has these truly extraordinary, graceful, and intelligent sons, Zach and Malachi, and a truly extraordinary wife and life partner in Trisha. It was really just a beautiful experience getting to know them all. 15 minutes in, we learn about his life in Canada at an earlier chapter. Then about 20 minutes in the interview, we're going to get into like his early days throwing trance parties in Cape Town. 2007 was his first Africa Burn. And for those of you who geek out on little details like I do, there's a lot of technical discussion on this episode. Like, where does one get more nails when you run out? And why would you run out? Then like 55 minutes in, we do talk about Mike's camp itself. Of course, my camp now. Okay, but let's go and get into that. Today's person in the hot seat, I tried to switch up some of the words there, is Mike Rule. Super important shout out, by the way, to 2019's clan concept designer. That's Miss Lindsay Sesford. She hails from Portugal, and her concept for a giant lamp with the Sand Clan design cut out of it was really magical and touched so many people. It even had a cord that you could pull, like a lamp cord, but like, a giant one, to turn the light on and off, and you could even make it disco. It was so much fun. Looking forward to seeing a lot more from Lindsay. Make sure to actually follow her on Instagram at lilydo.co. That's spelled LILYDO.co. We're going to link over to that on our show notes. And then after today's interview with Mike, you'll hear a set from Paris-based DJ Rogue Fire. An excellent and sexy deep house set, which was recorded Thursday sunset at Africa Burn 2019. The party was at the Cobra Cabana. The Cobra Cabana was this massive cobra art piece that looked as if it had like grown out of the desert. It was really fucking cool. I actually have some photos of this party. I didn't realize it until producer Louis chose this set for today's episode. I was like, oh, I was actually there. Episode 45 of this show, by the way, was called To Build a Temple. It was all about building the San Diego Regional Temple here at Utopia. So we're calling today's episode To Build a Clan. I like it because it works on like multiple levels. It's so meta. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There were sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
Exporting back home is like the bucket of water in the shower thing.
I was thinking maybe the water itself. I was like,
Oh no!
you know,
I'm here to take your water from South Africa.
stand in line for the water.
Because I grew up doing that in Iran, where we always had like a bucket of water in the shower and use that excess water to flush other things down, and then It's so funny, like the little things that we just get used to. Like there's a lot of like little things I've observed over my 2 weeks over here, of like stuff that I'm like, oh, I should go back home and do that. Like that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, well, if you got water shortages, there's a few things you can do. Obviously, you're going to catch some rainwater, and you can also save your shower water. So when you take a shower, you stand in a big basin, you catch all that water, and then you save that for flushing.
Yeah.
The bathroom.
You know what it is? I think it's because a lot of people think that the technology of a bathroom is such that you can't just pour water in it. Like it has to suction it out. But really, that's all it's doing is just pouring a bunch of water in there.
That's right.
Yeah. Guys, this is a really perfect, beautiful view at your home. How long have you lived here?
We're coming up for about 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Where are we now? 19. So... Yeah, I think we moved in here in 99.
Yeah, very nice. I 99. So I there's a lot of interesting stuff I've heard about you, like in the week that we camped together, about sort of like your background and how you got involved. So I've been really excited about kind of getting the whole Mike story from beginning to end. Let's go all the way to the beginning. Where were you conceived? No, I'm just kidding. We want to start. I do know that you used to be in the event production scene. You were throwing trance parties.
Yeah.
Did you grow up in Cape Town?
Actually, so if you want to go back to the beginning, I was born in Cape Town, and my parents moved for financial reasons to Johannesburg when I was 4 years old. So I actually grew up in Joburg, as we used to call it in those days. It's now known as Gauteng, and the license plate, when it became Gauteng, had a GP on it, so we affectionately like to know, like to call it Gangster's Paradise. I left Joburg when I was 18, and then I went to National Service, which we used to have in those days. So I was conscripted. I had 2 years in the Navy.
Yeah. National Service. So it's how many years did you have to serve?
2 years.
2 is the minimum.
2 was the minimum in those days. Yeah. I mean, shortly after that, when democracy arrived, then it was done away with. So then they stopped having the national service after that.
Really?
So, yeah.
Huh.
And it was only for whites.
Only white. Okay.
It was only for whites.
Yeah.
Although people of color could volunteer for national service, so you did have some. Indian guys, colored guys, African guys in the Navy, or in the armed forces during apartheid. It was quite interesting because they were kind of supporting a system that was oppressing them. But anyway, that's people do what they do to survive.
So the draft. I mean, we would call it the draft in the U.S. So the draft was specifically only for whites, but then if you're a non-white, you could volunteer.
Yes, you could volunteer and do. And do this like 2 years or longer. You could make a career of it too, you know what I mean? Which we called permanent force in those days.
Yeah. And then draft has been like completely removed now. Like,
right, yeah, exactly. So there's no more draft. I think something like that could be a good thing for employment and skills and stuff, you know what I mean? So it's not necessarily in the armed forces, but in all different forms of, because the Burning Man principle of civic responsibility. So we buy into that quite. There's things to be done in a society,
right?
That where a national service type thing can work and has been shown to work in other much more progressive societies than ours.
No, I've always felt. I mean, I worked for government for many years, and I always felt like that I had an understanding of how this stuff works a lot better than most people around me because they hadn't worked for government. I've always felt that we should have some. It would make a lot of sense to me that a country or a nation would have some sort of a draft type system, but not necessarily from military, just some sort of public service.
Yeah.
And even if your service is like working for your local, port district or, your city, cleanup crew, something.
Yeah.
For a couple of years, be a part of the system that you are, you're being taxed for. So you understand how the bureaucracy works. So it is all of us at the same time and not just, I don't know why it only goes to military. It's so strange.
Yeah, no, but military is just, that's another story. So back to my story.
Yeah. That'll happen a few times.
So after conscription, so after I did national service for 2 years, I traveled abroad for a bit, and then I'd been involved in sailing and in sailing boats when I was in high school, windsurfing and those kind of water sports. So I was quite interested in, and then when I traveled in the Mediterranean, I kind of was involved a little bit working in the charter boat industry. So I wanted to get more involved I wanted to sort of be employed or have a career in yachting. And so when I came back to South Africa, I worked in the boat building industry for a number of years. I sort of started out at the bottom as a trainee, and soon worked my way up to running a team of guys. So I guess it's like the earliest experience of running a team of artisans or a team of workers to do something that's like in the physical realm, when you build or make or repair something.
About what yearish was that?
Like very early 90s, like 1990. And then in 92, I moved to Canada with my girlfriend, who became my first wife, and she was from Canada, and I moved to BC with her. And I ended up spending like the next 6 years there, 7 years.
I've never really noticed there's a Canadian presence here. I don't know if that's just something that I randomly noticed or if it's an actual thing.
Well, there's a lot of international people on the Africa Burn scene. I think apparently now we're about 50% international. So you're going to meet people from everywhere. Right. And the Canadians are a pretty cool bunch, you know what I mean? Yeah. They're quite kind of laid back, and they're into stuff like, I guess there's, they're into that kind of like festivally kind of partying kind of stuff, you know what I mean? And
it's a big presence there.
Yeah, and they're creative, and I'm surprised they don't have their own regional events, or do they now?
Yeah, they don't. I read years ago that there's actually some event in Canada that was around like before Burning Man that was very similar.
Right.
I think there was some rivalry between Burning Man and this other thing.
I never heard about it. No, I never heard about it. But they do have a desert.
Yeah.
They have a desert in interior BC around a city called Kamloops. It's very arid there. So I reckon they could have a good, decent. Come on, you guys.
Yeah.
The Canucks, get off your asses. Let's have a regional event.
They do have also a festival that I was reading about that's like in like the middle of like an ice storm. Like you have to put layer after layer and everything, and then go dance in the snow. It's like nuts.
Yeah. Or on New, they go and swim. Yeah. They swim down at the beach on New Year's Day, which is like the dead of winter in the northern hemisphere. For us to go and swim on New Year's Day is what you do.
Yeah. Southern hemisphere.
But they do their polar bear swims. I don't know if you guys have that anywhere in the United States.
Not that I've attended.
That culture?
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I haven't quite built up to that yet. I'm still doing the cold shower thing.
Right.
How long were you in Canada?
Well, like I said, about 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
And then, I had subsequently separated from Denise, although we have remained friends via Facebook now as well, which is quite a good thing to reconnect with old connections and stuff. So we're in contact and stuff.
Nice.
Anyway, I'd separated from my first wife, and then I met my current spouse. I met Trisha when I was on holiday in Cape Town. And she was on holiday in Cape Town. And very shortly after we met, there was a third person involved, and that's our son, Zach. So we decided to relocate to South Africa because we had a lot of family here, and also because we could buy this house, straight away, which was much more affordable to get into the property market down here in South Africa than it would have been in England or in Canada, which were our choices. So we opted to move back down here, and that was about 20 years ago. So nobody can see the view, but Arash can testify.
It's absolutely glorious.
Epic.
Yeah.
So we live here. We've lived here. We're right on the edge of a national park. So right across that back fence there, it's a national park. So. And that lake falls into the national park, and it's a green belt all the way until the other side, but you can see the houses right across the other side. That's a green belt all the way across there.
Yeah.
And
And a greenbelt, by the way, just for listener clarification, I only became familiar with it when I went to Northern California.
Right.
And it's supposed to be like an unbroken string of nature. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
like
right.
government mandated.
Yeah. So in order to have certain status that the United Nations apparently confers, so you can become like a United Nations World Heritage Site under certain. Now I could be a bit vague on this. I'm a bit vague on it. So, but apparently, if you want to be like a natural World Heritage Site, you have to have a certain amount of continuous green corridor almost within the city or around the city or running past the city. And so in the Western Cape, the parks, the National Parks Board wanted to develop a green belt from the city all the way out to Cape Point. And it runs through, it runs along across the front of where we live, So that's
it's really gorgeous.
We're very blessed. And then you can actually do a hiking trail all the way from Cape Point to the CBD or vice versa. You can start in town and hike. It's like a 5-day hike.
Yeah.
So you will see subdivisions and little villages and towns, kind of suburbs along the way, but you won't walk through any. You'll stay up on the mountain and do that sort of walk along the greenbelt thing. So that's quite a nice.
And something interesting I wanted to point out is you're describing that you moved here for like the housing market. You had some family and friends here. It's so practical. Like a lot of people will do that, but they'll do it just within their own city region.
Yeah.
But it really is, and to them it almost feels like magic to move to like a whole other country. Like it's this whole massive shift, but it really was like practical reasons. And I've met quite a few people who have had those kind of reasonings for moving to different places.
Well, look, we had Tricia's parents were still alive. Mine still are. So we had the 4 grandparents living here in one city. And that was part of the motivation, was that our parents would get to experience their grandchildren not like once every 2 years when we flew in for 3 weeks from Canada or from the UK, and we didn't really want to live in the UK either because it's, the traffic, and we just had young kids and we just wanted to live in a nice place where we could have the babysitting of the grandparents maybe, or just, that relationship, just that continuation, that kind of soul thing that you do. So basically, I believe like soul, the difference between soul and spirit. So spirit's when you're out in the world, and soul is when you come back into yourself or into your hometown or into your family. Then you're in a soulful place, and you're in a spirited place when you're away from that, which is familiar to you. So we chose the soul over spirit.
Wow.
In that instance.
Yeah, that's powerful.
And that's about as deep as I'm going to go.
Oh, don't worry. We've got time. So were you still in like the yachting work when you got back here?
No. So what happened in Canada, I continued to work in the boating industry, and it was a lot more power boats than sailboats. And eventually I guess I just got a bit bored of it. I just needed to make a change, and I just needed to go on to other things. And I also kind of needed to kind of nurture a more entrepreneurial side of myself. So basically, when I quit my job in Canada, when I quit my boat building job, and I was working with a lot of chemicals and fiberglass and that kind of work, which also I wasn't really enjoying it that much anymore. So I moved on from it, but I'd had some experience doing carpentry and woodwork, so I started to work with the carpenters in the boat building, which of course yacht carpenters are the finest. It's the highest skill of boat building in any, as far as I'm concerned, one of the highest, highly skilled work, because it's very creative and technical. So I'd been working with them, and then I was friends with and living with a crowd of people in Canada that were doing a lot of architectural salvage. And this friend of mine there, Martin, had bought a piece of land about 2 hours outside of Vancouver in the mountains, and he was building a little homestead there for himself and his young family, and he was doing it with reclaimed timbers. So there was a lot of reclaimed timber around, and so then we were just exploring what we could do with that in terms of art and functional art, furniture, stuff like that. So I started to do more carpentry. We had a shop in our garage at the back of the house, and you know, tools are fairly inexpensive, so I was buying up tools, and I just found that I had like an affinity for it. But then it also there was also a business side to it, because now you had to sell the furniture and market it, and so we were doing like craft markets and Christmas markets and farmers markets in ski resort and stuff like that. So it was quite lucrative. We did quite well with that, and sort of built up my skill, my carpentry skill, and did some courses, because they have like a fabulous system in Canada. They have the Vancouver School Board. So all the facilities that are there for schooling are then made available in the evenings for adult education. So you can do anything from a bookkeeping and auditing course to you know, entrepreneurial courses and craft courses, and like jewelry making, carpentry, woodwork, carving, wood turning. So I did some of those courses and learned some more skills that way.
Were you into the music scene at that time at all? What were you listening to?
Well, that's a good story.
All right.
I never went to Lollapalooza when it was Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, and Red Hot Chili Peppers all on the same bill.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
That's a festival I never went to, because at the time I wasn't really into grunge. I was into world and reggae then, and I'd come from South Africa, and we were into a lot of world and reggae. So that's what I was kind of into, and those are the concerts that I went to. And then it was only later on that I started getting into the dance scene, and particularly into the Psytrance scene.
What yearish was that? What era?
That would have been sort of when we moved back to South Africa, around about sort of from 96 on. You know, then by the time we moved back, I had been going to a few events, and then anyway, so we moved back, and then we had a.
Can I ask? I'm sorry. Before you move, what was it about trance that like caught your attention? I mean, going from world beat and reggae.
No, it was just that it's, you know, in those days, yeah, there was a great atmosphere at parties, and it was you know, people were coming out of their shells, and you know, let's be honest, the drugs were helping.
Yeah.
Okay, that's how to put it, you know. So there was a lot of ecstasy and MDMA out, and people I loved the kind of the laugh of it, you know, and the and meeting people, and just the whole playfulness of it before we discovered the dark side. But anyway, so
you can't just let that hang there. We're gonna get to all of that. So
Right.
so you get into the trance thing sort of early on when you guys get back to Cape Town. You're in this home and you're doing the carpentry work. Is that correct?
yeah, so we came back to South Africa, and we Trisha was with the kids. The kids were quite young then, and Trisha was with the kids, and I started a furniture business. Continuing to make furniture with reclaimed timber, but it was a whole different scene, a different style, a different market, and I didn't really settle down into too much. And I tried a few different things. Then I sort of explored. I did a bit of tour guiding for a while, and did a bit of sales of things, and we were doing these kind of small, quite intimate trance parties with local DJs only, with a group of friends of mine. You know, I had one mate that was into, he could do the visuals, and another one that could do the sound. And I could kind of do the hustle. I could handle the door and the tickets and the cash from the bar and that kind of stuff. So we put together, we called ourselves Free Range, and we started off quite small. We had a few parties, and probably in the end we did about 15 parties altogether, indoor and outdoor. We had a bit of a name for ourselves, but there wasn't ever really money in it. So it became it was more of a hobby. And we brought a few international DJs. We actually were involved in bringing Eat Static, which was quite a, if anyone knows the early trance days, they'll know Eat Static. So we were the first ones to bring Eat Static to South Africa. And then we brought another international Coxbox, and we lost a bit of money on that event. And then at that point, we were kind of like, well, this is just too much work to take money out of a family's pockets. So we kind of moved on from that around about the same time, which is now 13 years ago, that Africa Burn was launched, which is the regional event.
Yeah. So were you aware of Burning Man during this era?
Yes, I was. So I was aware of Burning Man. I knew about it. A friend of mine had been there. I used to get Time magazine, and I think there was a Time magazine that had a cover, a Burning Man cover. There was somebody in a day glow skin tight suit on a unicycle on the cover of not Mad Magazine.
Mad Magazine.
Yeah, I love Mad Magazine. My whole life. I've been crazy about Mad Magazine since I was a child. We'll talk about that. No, so there was I think it was either Time or Newsweek. There was an article about this Burning Man, and a friend of mine went there in Burning Man's kind of 10,000-12,000 people kind of days, like early 90s. So she told us a lot about it, and then so we knew about it. It was something that was kind of, in the zeitgeist, as it were.
Sure.
Yeah. So, so then because of our involvement in the psytrance scene, we knew people who knew people, and we were invited to an afternoon at a farm. You actually met the people. It was Mark and Lil that you met on Friday nights in Hart Bay.
Oh, okay.
They had a farm near Bot River, and they had a thing on their farm one Sunday afternoon where you could go there and find out about Africa Burn. So we went there, and somebody called Paul Jorgensen explained the whole thing to us, and explained this, how it's a round circle, and it's 6 o'clock, that's 12 o'clock, and the street's going off, and all of that, and then said to us, you can do a theme camp, you can do an art piece, you can do a mutant vehicle, you can do a performance, and you're on your own, basically.
Yeah.
You can do all of this stuff. We're like giving you a blank canvas so you can bring it. So we basically decided to go and see what it was all about. The first time we went, the first year when it was the first Africa Burn, I think it was 2007. We went along, and one of the things that said to us was, there's no shade and there's no water. So prepare yourself accordingly. And we had young children, and we were women who expected certain comforts and that. So the first year was just a challenge to see if we could survive there. And if we could keep our kids happy enough for us to relax as well and just chill out and have a nice time. So we managed to pull it off despite the fact that it was November and a terrible time of the year to be there. And they subsequently changed the festival about 3 years in. They said, the local farmers have told us that the weather is positively balmy at the end of April, compared to sort of when they'd been trying it September, October, November, when it's like getting into summer and it's just brutally hot and very, very windy. The wind just howled nonstop for 4 days. So, we stuck with it. We stuck with it through the really windy years. And
how old were your children the first Africa Burn?
Well, they were sort of in the realm. We're talking 13. So sort of in the realm of about 8 and 9.
8 and 9. Okay.
Yeah. 8, 9 and a half.
And I mean, just full disclosure, bias to listeners. I've already been observing, like, I've met 2 of your kids, I think.
Yeah, I've got 2. There's 2.
Yeah.
No, there's no more.
There are no more. Okay, just these 2.
Okay.
I thought there were 4 for some reason.
No.
They are extraordinary young men. I mean, like, they are amazing people. And I had such an amazing time getting to know them, meeting them. There's a confidence in them. There's a pleasantness. There's a grace and a maturity. And I'm really interested to kind of hear like some of the story of what your thoughts on like parenting is and what it's like to have kids grow up in burn culture, like as they are.
Well, you know what it is about the kids, that whatever they're like, you can blame the parents.
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing they're not.
No, look, their mother had some very progressive ideas, and I had to get my head around that.
Like what?
Well, they've never been vaccinated,
Okay.
which is a big one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because it's quite a hard thing
Yeah.
these days, vaccinate or not. So they were never vaccinated. They never had antibiotics. They were never physically disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and then we always wanted them to always be able to talk to us about whatever was going on. You know what I mean? So we always want them to feel that whatever's happening in their life, they can talk to us about it. That's been like a cornerstone of how we've raised them. You know what I mean? In a very kind of open and honest communication kind of environment. You know what I mean? So it's not, that's, raising children. That's one of the big things when you take it on. If you take it on, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a big thing to do. You know what I mean? It requires a lot of, it's this thing that I've got present to at Africa Burn of living consciously. You know what I mean? You can't just, you have to make plans and think about what you're doing and what your next steps are and how you're going to go about it and what the effect of whatever it is you're doing is going to be. So, and they've been to virtually every Africa Burn. They've missed one or two between the two of them. So they've also grown up in that culture. There was a time when they were going to trance events with us when they were much younger, and then we kind of put a stop to it when they were at a certain, period of, we just didn't think it was appropriate for them to be there at that point, and then later on, Africa Burn was so big and spread out, and there was a lot there that worked for children as well, you know what I mean? And then in the evening, you didn't have to take them to some of the raunchier camps, you know what I mean? They could stay in the camp, and they just loved it because it's such an adventure when you go and you're camping and you're showering under a bucket out in the open, and stuff like that. We used to have a couple of barrels of water that they would be a swimming pool for the kids. They'd be in and out all day, you know what I mean? So so they just really loved it, and
That's fascinating.
and then we started, so in the first year that we went there, we just wanted to see if we could survive and what it would take to live in such a harsh environment for a period of time with kids and everything. So we needed to first create a home that worked, and then we could do something else. So and then also one of the things that happened was that the kids were quite young, and the effigy was burned quite late at night for them. To be out that late was a challenge. So we decided what we would bring would be a burn for the children.
Okay.
And that would be burned earlier in the evening. So whoever's kids were there could come and watch something being burnt down.
Oh, that's so cool.
Watch an art piece being burnt, and they wouldn't have to stay up till 10 o'clock or, whatever. It was quite late for kids in those days.
Because back then there wasn't as many different art pieces that was being burned. That were.
No, I don't know. I've heard that they don't burn that much stuff at Burning Man. Is that right?
No, there's plenty of burns. I guess they're kind of like a bigger deal. The smaller, you have to go through a process, and it's usually it's such a huge event.
Yeah.
And there is definitely a discussion that's starting to be had about like how good is this for the environment, for us to shoot this massive structures, setting them on fire. So you can't just walk around setting whatever you want on fire. Like there's a process.
No, but we have a lot. Yeah. So, look, there were always a few from the start, and then early on. So then we, to bring back to what I was talking about with the kids. So then we did like an official kids burn, which was a piece that we built with the children, and something that we try to kind of work it to the theme. And then in some years, and we did that about 5 or 6 years in a row with the kids, from say 2008 to 2012. So I think it was 5 years in a row.
What was one of the cool themes that you did the kids burn around?
Well, we wanted to tie something from childhood to something from the in the theme. So in the 1 year it was dream. I think the theme was dream, and we did a giant Rubik's cube, and that was really cool. And it was stood like on one point. It was actually supposed to be elevated, but we didn't get our engineering right. So it was resting like on one point on the desert floor, and we made it in layers. So when we first put it up, it was all jumbled up as the Rubik's Cube wasn't solved. And then we went in the middle of the night and pulled the layer off. So the next day it was solved. And then we would watch people walking past and going, hang on a minute, something's different. Yeah, someone's come in and solved this thing, you know. And then because it was quite a low, it wasn't enormous. The perimeter was quite close for when we burnt it, but it was basically a 1.8 meter cube packed solidly with waste wood. So you know, if you take in those days, their rule of thumb for perimeter was like 1.5. You know, the perimeter was only like 3 or 4 meters away.
Yeah.
We lit this thing on fire, and it was so hot that people were just scrambling. We even had like a projector projecting on it while it was burning. It was too close to it.
The projector was?
The projector and the guy doing the projections with his laptop on a table and everything were about 10 meters away. But the perimeter, the fire just naturally pushed the perimeter to about 30 or 40 meters, you know. Yeah. Because it was just so hot. For a small fire, it was incredibly hot. So we had to scramble and move all this tech, the projector, the laptop, the table, and all the cabling and everything had to be like moved out the way because it was about to melt.
Safety third.
Yeah, exactly. But it was a wonderful effect of this smoke coming out of this thing while it was being projected on. So that was quite cool.
That's cool. Did you? So at what point did you get involved with building the SandClan, and designing it?
Well, they went through a bit of a period where they hadn't quite got the technology right for making something burn. So they had a couple of burns that took a long time to really burn or didn't really burn properly, you know. And I started to look at this and say to myself, well, I think I can do something that burns. You know what I mean? The whole idea is that it's got to flip and burn. So that was one of the early motivations. And then, you know, we'd done this Kids Burn a few times, and they were looking around for someone to do the effigy. They were asking for submissions. So I think the first year I submitted something, it didn't get accepted, and then that would have been for 2011, and then we submitted again the next year, and they chose. They based the effigy on parts of what I'd submitted, so they wanted to change my submission slightly, which I was fine to do. So that was the first year. That was 2012, and then a couple of years went by, and 2016 we did the clan. 2018 we did the clan, and now 2019 we've done the clan. So I'm kind of the guy who, if they have a submission where the artist doesn't have the knowledge and skills to build a piece, but they've got a great a piece that they want to build, and they bring me in as the kind of contract builder almost to build somebody's, you know, if it's someone that has never built anything, but it's a great concept, you know, then they bring me with my skills and knowledge and background and resources in the carpentry business. They bring me in with my team, plus volunteers.
You're the one that can manifest it into the reality.
Yeah. So for this year,
the day they're referring to is the Africa Burn org.
Yeah, the org. Yeah. Okay. So the org brings us in to, you know, when they have a clan they want to build, but whoever's conceived it is not going to be the one who builds it. You know what I mean? So, you know, basically for this year's effigy, which was this lamb, they had the concept, but the person whose concept it was, which was Lindsay, we were hoping she was going to be here, but unfortunately she's very busy with other things. It was her concept, but she didn't really have any idea of how it was going to be built. You know what I mean? She had a maquette, and just the engineering of it's quite a thing. You know what I mean? So basically, I created the solution for the concept that they had.
And what was it? Was there parts of it that in the design you were looking at and going like, this might not be as realistic to do, this is how we're going to change it? Or were you able to take what was on the page and make it happen?
Yeah, pretty much take what was on the page and make it happen, but I'm also quite practical, so I also had to sort of bring them to earth a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, this is what's possible within your budget, because we're working to a fairly strict budget, so like, this is what's possible within your budget, we can do that, and that's what we can do within the time frame. So I'm very solution focused when it comes to, because even in my working life, a lot of times we'll get plans, you get plans and this is what they want to do, but they haven't really given, the architect hasn't given like you've got to work with the architects to what they want. You've got to work with an engineer for what is going to be safe in a structure. So, so I create a solution and then I go to the engineers and the architects for approval. And I say, this is what you want to build. You want it to look like this. This is how we're going to achieve that. Are you happy with that? Right. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
How long did that process take?
On this job? On this
last
client
one.
job? Look, I didn't really put a timer on it, but I had several meetings, and then another associate of mine, because I also work in the film industry in set building. So another associate of mine who's in the set building industry, in film industry, he's very good with SketchUp. So I would pull him in and get him to do the design of it, the digital design of it. And he works out like the stuff that has to get CNC'd, which is computer navigated cutting. So you have to send a file to the computer, which then sends the instructions to the cutter to cut your boards in a certain shape. So that's how we do a lot of what we do with those kind of sculptures is we use, it's digitally designed, and then you use a CNC to cut it, but then so then the way that one, for quite a while I wanted to do something with big poles, So this was an opportunity to try this thing out that I want to do with the big poles.
And for the listeners, by the way, who may not have looked it up yet, it was a giant lamp, and it actually had the SandClan pictograph cut into it, and then you could pull the light, like you could hang on the light and turn it on, and it would switch lights, it would switch designs, so different colored lights would come out and stuff. It was really cool.
Yeah, and then you could look inside. So when you looked inside at the back of the piece, when you went through the door and looked inside, then you could see the structure on the inside, which was these four 14-meter poles that were holding the whole thing up. You know what I mean? So that was quite cool, and I wanted to do this thing with the poles because you get to you've achieved the 2/3 of your height basically in the first 3 days of the build. You know what I mean? You're already, if you can get it right and you can get these poles up, then everything else is just hung off that. You know what I mean? So that way you're at, you're already at a very decent height on day 3 or day 4 of the build.
Yeah.
So then from there, then you can start to focus on your aesthetic part of it. You know what I mean? You get your structure in and make sure it's good and solid, and it's going to support everything.
How big was your team on this build?
We were up to probably about 20 people max.
Were the 20 people that were there the whole month for the build?
I'd have to look at the crew list.
Yeah.
On and off.
On and off.
Roughly 20 people for a month, yeah. And we were, say, about 8 people for a week in Cape Town before we left, which is what we call a pre-build. So we were sorting out everything and doing a lot of cutting because our CNC, we basically, because there was a lot of repeats, where there were a lot of repeats, we just had one piece CNC'd and then manually cut them off the pattern. So we pattern cut. So that all happened in the first week before we left. And then there's all the preparation and getting everything together that you need, all your materials and your tools and your camping equipment and all of that stuff that has to be organized so that you can live there for a month, because we lived there for a month. So, yeah. So all in all, we had 4 days in Cape Town and 24 days in Tankwa Town building the piece.
And then what sorts of challenges have you experienced building in that environment in the desert that like you aren't going to necessarily see in like a normal work environment, like things that you couldn't have predicted until you were physically out there doing it?
Look, this, like one of the things, for example, is we ran out of the small nails that we were using for the cladding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I think a year ago we'd had like 12,000 nails and it was just enough. And I ordered 15,000 nails and we ran out of them and we were only like halfway through doing the cladding.
Yeah. And how did that happen? Shrug. Who knows?
No, it's just... we had to put a lot of extra nails in because they're very small nails. They're like, it's a brad nail. It's like a 16 gauge. And, you know, for every connection where the cladding is sitting on the frame, you're putting about 6 or 8 nails. And then the wind was ripping the cladding off, so we had to put extra nails and an extra little pad of timber there. And so we just ended up using a lot more nails than we expected. So
and
in
all
the
of that
end, we got
needs to be cleared afterwards
exactly.
as well.
And in the end, we got like another 10,000, and that was enough.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, because you can't just go to your regular supplier. Your supplier is 350 kilometers away, and you know you've got to pay them and get your nails and have them brought up. And even the local towns, which service a lot of farmers in the area, so you're like traveling 100 kilometers to a store which is like Home Depot but for farmers in a farming town. And they have a lot of stuff, but they just don't have like really specific things. Like it's a really specific size and gauge of nail, which I went to the local farmers agri, we call it, and I phoned a number of agris and hardware stores in the area. None of them had what I was looking for, so we basically had to sit and wait 2 or 3 days for more of these little nails to come from Cape Town. So that's like quite a challenging thing, you know what I mean? It's like, it's this whole thing that I impress upon the crew, of that you have to live consciously, because like in Cape Town, when you want to have a cold beer, you go to the cold beer and wine store and you buy 6-pack of cold beers. You come home and you put them in the fridge or whatever, you know what I mean? And if they're not cold, you put them in the freezer half an hour, they're cold. But when you're out there, you got to think about, how I want cold beers tonight. How am I going to do that? So you can't really like live. You got to live consciously. You can't live too much like with a short attention span or like immediate gratification that we used to living in the city. You know?
Can't be on autopilot.
No, exactly. You know, so even things like communication, you got to go to where there's Wi-Fi specifically. You know, I mean, you're not going to have your normal roaming through your cell phone provider. You can just have Wi-Fi anywhere when you're in the city. You know what I mean? You can have connected to the internet at any point. But when you're out there, now you want to connect to the internet. Now you got to go to the bus where there's some Wi-Fi. You know, now all of a sudden your car's got a flat tire, so now you can't go and do that. So the smallest tasks, like connecting to the internet, which is just a no-brainer in the city, suddenly the smallest task becomes brain damage
and
to get it done.
Going for a supply run, because like driving through that road can be kind of nerve-wracking, you know, with like the pop tires that it causes. Like it's people know, I think by now, for listeners who aren't aware, that last stretch into Tonquah Town where Africa Burn is held, like is just like claimed an uncountable number of tires over the years. It's got these sharp rocks. So you even when you're like, God, I gotta go on the supply run, like I can't wait for this task to be over. Now you gotta like drive super slow and be aware of the tires.
Look, it's 130 kilometers of dirt road that's got very sharp stones on it. So you have to, even on smooth sections that seem smooth to you, you have to be not tempted to drive too fast. You have to keep it around 70 k's an hour. You know, not more than 70, 80 maybe, but, you know, it's the guys that are blasting along at 100, 90, 100, 110 that, first of all, have accidents, and second of all, get a lot of flat tires.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They've got a big SUV, and they think because they've got big, strong tires, they can do it. And it's just a question of keeping your speed down. So I did get one flat this year, but that's because in fact, another volunteer was driving my truck, and he got a flat. And so we had the spare on, and then that was a bit of an old tire, so that got a flat. But every year you get a couple, not too many. But I did that road in 2018. I did that road 12 times.
God,
in the build. You know, I've got an alternative route, by the way, which I'm not going to tell you where it is.
Oh,
'Cause I don't
wow.
want too many people to take it. But you can cut. There is an alternative route, and you can cut maybe a third of that road off. So you've
Interesting.
got like a third less dirt road.
Yeah.
You get to tar a little bit faster, and parts of it on this alternate route, parts of it are tarred. Although smaller cars wouldn't really handle it because it's quite steep gravel road over a mountain.
Yeah, I learned at Burning Man, I met someone a couple of years ago who worked in town, like a couple hours away.
Yeah.
And he was telling me that there's actually like another entrance that a lot of people don't know about, which is like more like a service entrance, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Like people have to go back to work and come back in. So
Right.
rather than the Gerlach one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is with Africa Burning is the road's terrible, but your center is not that far. You can go and you can find a shopping center within like 100 k's. But I met somebody who's been on Burning Man and worked at DPW quite a lot, and she was telling me that, you know, if you want a supply run, like Reno's 3 hours away, and the small town nearby, it's not really going to have much. Is that true?
I'm terrible with numbers.
Yeah.
But it depends on what it is that you're looking to purchase. I mean, like Gerlach is the closest super little small town.
Right.
Then you got to go a little further to get to Reno, and that's like another 4 hours.
So you've really got to have everything that you.
Yeah. But then there's also the thing is, if you're out there for like build, obviously, like,
Yeah.
there's nobody out there, so you got to do those things. When it's Burning Man time, there's tons of people there, and you can try to go find somebody who's got the thing.
Yeah,
that
exactly.
you
Yeah, I
need.
know. And people are gifting
Yeah.
meals and stuff like
Yeah.
that. You know what I mean? So
I literally, we had a project a couple of years ago where we just like, my suggestion, which they bought into, was like, we couldn't figure out an engineering issue.
yeah,
And I was like, you know what? I'm willing to gamble. Let's just get out there and start building. And I bet we'll randomly meet
someone.
the right engineer who can come and figure this out for us. And-
Right,
And it happened.
and you did. Yeah, yeah.
Somebody,
exactly.
we just put the word out there that this is a thing we're looking to solve, and then the right person happened to show up.
Yeah. But I mean, you've got it's that kind of culture. I mean, that kind of thing happens in Africa Burn too, because we're doing a build, and then people will arrive or we'll get a message from town like this, and this person wants to volunteer, and they've got carpentry experience, and they got tools, and they bring in the nails that you need as well.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean? Say, come along then, you know what I mean? So you get that kind of thing. I mean, we had quite an interesting experience with a number of different engineers wanting to give input on an engineering issue. And, well, we finally shut them down.
Why is that?
Just because I mean, it's a long story, but it's long and quite technical, but we didn't feel happy with what they were recommending
Right.
in terms of an engineering solution to a challenge that we had. And we, in the end, we did sort of take a bit of a chance on it. And, it's a risk. Go, well, are we going to do what we want to do? Or are we going to do what the engineer wants us to do? And at the end of the day, we opted to say, look, we'll do what we want to do, and we're willing to take responsibility for that.
Right.
If we're going to do what somebody else wants us to do, because I'm in the construction business, and I work with engineers a lot, I said, I don't want a lot of different kinds of engineers. If you want somebody who's going to come and advise on this structure, then first of all, no one's going to advise on the structure unless they've asked me what the spec is. Not one of those engineers said to me, what size are those beams that are carrying that weight? Because I work with timber engineers that they want to know the size of the timber. Then they can enter it into their computer program, which tells them exactly how much weight and torsion and all wind resistance and everything that particular beam will carry. So I said, basically, I had to put a boundary and say, until you bring an engineer that's experienced in timber construction and has the right program for timber construction, and I give him the spec of what we're doing, and then he can come and say that's going to work, what's not going to work.
And I think in addition to all that too, leadership, I think, basically, it's not a guarantee that you're going to be 100% right. Leadership just means you're willing to take on the responsibility for if it fucks up.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's a lot of responsibility in that.
Yeah.
It's one of the tightest deadlines that I work to in the whole year. Because, when you're working at somebody's home, Look, some of the bigger projects, obviously the commercial projects, they do have their completion dates with penalties if you don't complete in time and that kind of stuff. But normally the timeframes are enough that you can get what you need done. I mean, I had a few jobs that were very tight schedules, but if you're working at somebody's home, which in and of itself is, I've come to realize, is a beautiful thing, because you're creating something for someone that they're going to live with for a long time.
Yeah.
And you build up it's quite a special relationship, you know what I mean? People really appreciate it. But, you know, if you say you're going to finish on Wednesday and then you go there on Tuesday and say, look, it's actually going to be Thursday or Friday because we got this and this, most of the time it's fine. And they don't have a problem with it, you know what I mean? I've had a job where it was a commercial job and there was a wedding on the Saturday.
Oh, yeah. That can't be nudged.
No, exactly. And the bride's like jumping up on Thursday afternoon because the place is not finished. But, I mean, we got it done, you know what I mean?
At the burn, the bridezillas you're dealing with are the burners.
You know, and some people are, whether they're happy to or not, they end up building their piece during the festival, and you could argue that that's part of the art. You know, people get to see what it takes to build something as opposed to just arriving and it's all there. So in a way, it's a good thing, but I don't want to be that guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When it's festival time, I want to be relaxing. You know what I mean? So,
and then and you know, everything you're describing is also just like making me think like all of this affects, of course, people's like moods and emotions. You're dealing with a mix of like volunteers and personalities. And you have to kind of keep this thing on track and keep it going. Like how, and that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff to handle, and it's like hot, and that's adding to people's moods and breakdowns.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the people side is one of the hardest things for me, is to dealing with. You know, I often say, like, if I could have 20 little robots and someone is good at programming, then my job would be much easier, and then maybe I wouldn't have a job. You know what I mean? Yeah. So the people energy is one of the hardest things, because tools and equipment you can get, you know what I mean? Of course, it's a pain if a tool, you know, if it breaks down and you've got to hustle to get something, you can borrow it from another artist or you can get it sent up. You know, we've got a lot of support from the org in that piece particular. It's their baby, you know what I mean? They kind of, other artists that are more independent aren't able to lean on the org as much as we are when we're doing the main effigy. It's their main thing. It's their biggest grant that they give. Right. And they have a vested interest in seeing it finished on time. So we get a lot of support from the org, to their credit. And so the people thing is one of the hardest thing, you know, with volunteers, that they're volunteering so they don't, you don't have that financial hold of them. Well, if you don't go to work, you're not going to get paid. Well, I'm not getting paid anyway, so I don't have to get up at 5:30 in the morning just because you say so, you know what I mean? And look, the volunteers were amazing. They always are, and I love them to bits. You know, they're great, you know what I mean? But they get tired, you know, towards the end of the month. You know, they've worked 6-day weeks in extreme conditions. It's getting close to the festival. They're starting to party. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like to get that last little push out of them when, you know, they start to feel that the pieces may be finished now, because it looks finished, but there's still the mooping and the tidying up and setting up lighting and doing whatever else needs to still be done. There's still, you know, getting the camp tidy for some other people that are going to arrive. Whatever there is to do, there's still stuff to do. And then they sort of in a like, well, we're finished kind of place. Right. Well, we're not quite finished yet. So
yeah, some of the energy that I was observing with you, it just felt like you were like in dad mode all day, every day.
Well, I've made this joke about having to breastfeed, and I made the joke so often that some of the volunteers who were just on for a short time, they came back and they gave me a tub of nipple cream as a gift.
Nice. That's excellent.
No, it's a thing I picked up from some of the lead hands in the film industry. They refer to when they're having to like really coax and really coach and support artisans through a job. They say, I'm having to breastfeed this person. So I really latched onto that, you know. And
latched. So you're like generally a very practical, like focus on getting it done, like project management, you know, physical kind of person. And I'm wondering, do you have that private moment ever where you take a step back and you're like, wow, look where we are, look what we've done? When does that happen?
Yeah, no, that's, you know, that happens all the time. Look, I mean, I take it on. I often say I do the emotional work. I do the emotional work so that the org doesn't have to. I take on the stress of it, and I'm having to push pretty hard. So you can lose sight of that. But then I also try to really acknowledge and appreciate the team and appreciate where we're at and what we're facing all the way through. You know what I mean? So we have that moment. You know what I mean? I have that moment often. That's a big part of it. That's obviously what keeps you going. You're focusing on the positive and what you have achieved as opposed to what you haven't. But I'm a choleric temperament, which means that I'm very focused on the result, and I tend to let the relationships suffer as a result. But I make it clear to people that's what I'm like, and it's not a personal thing.
Yeah.
It's a temperamental thing. You know what I mean? So, yeah. So that's how we get it done now.
I had a question. Is Africa Burn soul or spirit?
No, it's both. It's both, because camp is very soulful. You know what I mean? When you're in the camp and you're with your homies and you're doing that chilled out camp thing. But I think when you're out and about, on the people say playa, but it's actually not the playa. I set this straight right now.
Yeah.
In Africa Burn, it's not called the playa; it's called the binnekring.
Okay.
Which means the circle on the inside, and people get confused because the road that runs around the binnekring is the binnekring road.
Uh-huh.
So a lot of people, even people that have been to Africa Burn for years and years, still say playa.
Yeah.
But
That's where I got it from.
No, well, in actual fact, we get corrected.
Yeah,
The org
interesting.
corrects us. There's one person in particular whose name I won't mention. Who I've learned not to say playa. So when you're out on the binnekring, I think it's more spirit.
Yeah.
You're out there. But when you're in your camp, it's much more soul.
Yeah. So speaking of camp, Camp Sunset Oasis, of course, is who I camped with. Your camp, the longest running camp apparently at Africa Burn. You guys.
Well, apparently we are. So we've had 12 in 13 years of Africa Burn. We've had 12 consecutive registrations under that name in the same area.
Yeah.
Not exactly the same spot, but we've kind of settled now at the end of 5-ish. It's waterfront property. It's some real good. It's some real valuable real estate out there. We're on the edge of a dry river, and there's people aren't allowed to camp past us. So they are now camping beyond. They've set up new as they grew. So there are camps a little bit beyond. So we've got a great view. We're not surrounded on all sides by other camps and roads. You know what I mean? So
that's really nice.
yeah, it's a great spot. And I was told that we're the longest running camp. And in actual fact, we share that honor with Burning Male, who has also had 12 registrations, but not 12 continuous registrations. So for what it's worth.
Yeah. How did you come up? How did the theme come together? How did Sunset Oasis become what it is?
Well, because you've got such great sunsets, and if you walk out into the desert 10 meters from our camp, you can sit there and have a great sunset. So it's an awesome place to do a sunset. And because we always had a lot of water, so right from the beginning when they told us there's no water and there's no shade, we took a lot of water. We started off with 1,000 liters in the first year, and it was more water than we could use ourselves. So we started letting people shower there, because a lot of people would come and they didn't have all the infrastructure that we had. So we started letting people shower because we had excess water. And then we had these like barrels that the kids were swimming in. So it was like an oasis, really. That was the motivation. There was water and shade, and it was an oasis in the desert. And that's how it came about. Yeah.
Was the day spa thing there in the earlier days, or?
No, it wasn't. So what we did was we did the kids burn, and we did a margarita party. That was one of the things that we did. So a couple of years we did the margarita party at our camp. So the camp was registered as a theme camp, but it wasn't like a full-on theme camp as it is now. We did things, you know what I mean, but it wasn't much based around the camp. It was more out on the binnekring, but it was kind of our home, and we registered it as a theme camp. and of course we had like a nice chill space, and it's Africa Burn, so everybody's welcome, you know. And one of the things that we used to say in our gate blurb was, it's we've got young children, so please make sure that it remains an appropriate environment for children to be in. We had other families involved, and they didn't want to do a kids camp per se. They didn't want people to drop their children there. They didn't want us to become like a daycare.
Yeah.
You know, we don't want other people to, they're welcome to come there with their kids and chill with us, and their kids can do what our kids are doing, but it's not a place, it's not a kids camp per se. So there was it was a bit vague in the beginning. And then, you know, and then probably about 5 years ago, some of the families that were involved left. It's quite a feature of South African life, is that people, you know, leave South Africa because it's quite a volatile environment, business-wise and socially and politically. It's not a barrel of laughs, you know, really. So people leave South Africa if they can. They do, you know what I mean? So you experience loss of your friends whose kids grew up with your kids, you know what I mean? It's a factor of life here. So some of the people left, and it came down to myself and Trisha and the two boys and our boys' godmother. It went from a camp that would easily have about 25, 30 people to a camp that had 5 people.
Wow.
And that was back in kind of the year after that was sort of in 2013, 2014. So 2013, we were like 5 people, but still registered a camp, and we did a mutant vehicle. And 2014, we were another single mother and her kids and us. So we were like 8 or 9 people, you know, and now we're back up to, and then we started to explore that day spa thing, but there weren't enough of us to really make it happen properly. So we had space where people could relax, and we had the showers that people could shower. And then it just kind of took off, and other people that we knew wanted to join or wanted to come and needed to have a camp to stay at. And I pushed them. I said, that's lovely, but it's participation. You know what I mean? What are you going to do to justify asking the org for such a great spot? And in actual fact, the what do we call it? Sonica does it, the demarcation, or when they give you your spot,
Placement.
So placement became interesting for me because, you know, you want to, it's nice to be in a good spot, you know, close. So that spot that we have is a fantastic spot because it's one of the shortest streets. So we're on the second street. We're not like on the Binnekring, the main street. We're on this one street back, but you're very close to the Binnekring. So you can walk out and you're on the Binnekring quite quickly, but you're also right on the edge of the desert. So it's a you know, it's a sought after spot. And we we were
definitely spoiled. I can tell you, like, just the experience of just like hopping right out to go out there to like take photos or like go to a theme camp.
Yeah.
I brought like my hydro. This is not recommended, listeners, but like I brought my hydro pack and just like pretty much never put it on because it was really easy to just go out to like things and then come back home to camp and grab like more water or grab another beer.
Yeah. It's not as big as Burning Man, you know. So you're not, you know, you don't have the distances, you know. You know, don't have the distances that you don't get lost. Although people get lost. I mean, I had some English people that came to the camp this year, and they were like, "We don't know how to get back to the playa." Okay, I've been here for 13 years. Let me direct you. You know what I mean? And it's only one. You're so close. But anyway,
I got a little lost around like Thursday-ish.
Right.
Like all of a sudden, a bunch of new shit popped up, and that part is, by the way, is very Burning Man experience. And all of a sudden, there was like a 700% increase of people with cell phones taking photos and selfies.
Right.
So that part of it is very much exactly like Burning Man around Thursday.
Yeah. No, I won't say I never got lost. Years ago, when the festival was much smaller, and we started arriving because, you know, we figured out quite early on that if you go for 4 days, your 4 days are pretty much going to be very busy. You're going to set up your camp, you're going to erect your piece, you're going to burn your piece, you're going to break your camp down, and you don't feel as though you've had any kind of holiday or R&R at all, you know what I mean, which is important for us. So we started making our trips longer. We started doing like 6 days, 7 days, and eventually we were doing like 10 days up there, you know. And one year we arrived early on and there wasn't much around. And we got our spots and we set up our camp, and then it got dark. And I decided to go for a little walk to see what there was. And I got so lost. I was walking up and down, couldn't find my camp, couldn't find. And it's not because there were so many camps. It was just because there was so little. It was just vacant space. And we didn't have a proper light out to, you know, something to indicate where our camp was. So,
Yeah.
I'll
do it.
Yeah, and then in about the third or fourth year, we started putting up this giant silver flag because it was quite windy. So we had this massive silver flag, which then people could see from everywhere. And then it was easy to find your camp because you just went to the silver flag, which was like towering above everything else on that sort of side of the thing, you know. Yeah.
Has these years of experiences affected the way that you run your family, the way that you guys, you the four of you experience things? I mean, your kids have been going pretty much, you know, every year. It's a family raised in Africa Burn.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very hard to quantify that kind of thing. It's a tough question. Just ask me the question again.
How do you think that experience of burning for this many years developed your family? Like, what can you imagine what life would be like with your family if Africa Burn was not a part of it?
Yeah, look, it's a tough one, but I mean, it's something that we've done. You know, it's a part of our life, and our life has a lot of other stuff in it. You know, we're pretty busy. You know, we've raised kids, we've got businesses, we have built a rental property business in the last 20 years. So all of that takes a lot of time, you know what I mean? So Africa Burn is, I would say it's fairly compartmentalized. It's a big part of our social life because the people that we do Africa Burn with are our friends and that we socialize with during the year. So we're connected to it that way. We go to some of the events that they do, like the Streetopia and the Decompression. You know, we don't go to all of them, but we try to go to some of them through the year to somehow stay connected to the community. You know what I mean? We get the newsletter, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? But yeah.
Do you have any plans or visions of like a family trip to Burning Man?
Yeah, not yet. Look, would be a very expensive exercise for us from this side. So financially, it hasn't really been something that would be a reality for us. You know, we do try to do like a family trip once a year, which like a holiday camping trip or something once or twice a year, which are normally fairly local in South Africa. We've been, you know, Trisha's family's from East Africa, so we've been with the kids. We've taken them to Kenya to visit my brother-in-law and their cousins there. We've been to Madagascar a couple of times. Some of us in the family surf, so we go on surf trips as much as we can. You know what I mean? And every holiday that we take, it's surfboards and, you know, that kind of stuff. Yeah. You know, we go travel up the coast, surf wherever it's working if we can, you know, that kind of thing. So, but I would say we do, it has been something that's kind of part of our life, you know what I mean? If it's like cleaning up, it's like mooping, you know what I mean? Gifting, you know, doing something for someone else that where you don't expect something in return. Yeah. You know, the connections and the friends that we've made. And it's quite an interesting thing because I believe that, or there's a school of thought which I subscribe to, which is like, what are the things that are fundamental to humans? It's important to humans to have. Well, obviously, like all living organisms, food, air, shelter, but being part of something that's bigger than yourself is a major thing for human beings. And it's why we have church, or used to have church. It's why we have such strong corporate culture where people are like they work for Microsoft or Google or Amazon. You know, they feel like it's why those companies can get what they get out of employees because people buy into the culture. You know what I mean?
Community.
Yeah,
That's a lot of what they. A lot of the studies where non-religious people will look at religious people and say like it's all about the God thing, and usually a lot of times it's because just they get used to going to that community aspect.
Yeah.
It's the community building that's stuck.
Yeah, even if they're not conscious of why they do it, it's fulfilling this need of being part of something that's bigger than yourself.
Right.
That's what's fundamental to humans. It's being part of something that's bigger than yourself, and like the different dance scenes or different youth subculture things take care of that. You know, you grow up and you have an identity. You're like a punk or a rocker or a new wave or a hippie. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or you like a particular type of music, so you go to those events. You like psytrance, or you like deep house, or you like hip hop. You know, you go to those events and you meet other people that like it, and you do that stuff together. You know what I mean? And it's not just you doing your own little thing. You know, even surfing has that kind of social element because there's, you know, you surf with other guys that surf, and you become friends with them and you connect with them in the water or in the parking lot. You know what I mean? So it's that's a thing like that.
Yeah, absolutely. What so like right now, I mean, obviously we've just finished a week after Africa Burn.
Yeah.
What are you dealing with right now? Are you thinking about next year? Or are you just kind of like relaxing right now? It's vacation mode.
It's not vacation mode. No, I'm self-employed, so I have a financial commitment to make every month. So I'm focused on generating business and doing the jobs that I've got booked.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I'm in construction. You know, I'm in the construction business. So,
will you build again next year for Africa Burn?
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know what. You know, it's not something that I'm attached to. If it works out that we do, then we do, and if it works out that we don't, then we don't. We'll do something else. You know what I mean? I've got some ideas around the camp. We've got an idea for a mutant vehicle fleet and like a new and different concept, but the concept that the camp has, the day spa that the camp has, is an amazing thing, and I'd hate to see that fall away. So I'm hoping that some of the people are going to still carry on and do that, because it's a really, really awesome thing at Africa Burn. But I'm also interested in doing a different concept involving some vehicles, possibly dirt bikes, whatever. I don't know. Yeah. So I've got all of that to think about, and we're also trying to transition our lives into less hectic and less commitments, and just try and slow down, because we're getting at that stage where our oldest child is almost finished his tertiary education, and our youngest one is about to start his. So we're kind of moving to, having our kids leave home and go and be on their own feet eventually, hopefully. Yeah. So we're dealing with all of that kind of stuff right now as well. How we're gonna make all of that work.
Well, you've raised two absolutely spectacular humans, so I feel completely confident that they're going to do amazing stuff in the world.
Yeah, I've had a lot of support raising my children, so I must acknowledge that. Yeah,
Trisha's this amazing person.
Yeah, and their godmother, Laurence, is fantastic as well. She's also a big burner, has been to most of the burns, and has been a large part of supporting us to raise them. So that's been amazing to have that,
That's great. Yeah. And Mike, thank you so much for having built up this camp. Thank you so much for this tribe that you've built that I got to personally come and take full advantage of. My experience at Africa Burn was really, I just, every night I would go to sleep, every morning I'd wake up and go, God, how did I get hooked up this amazingly with this amazing camp? I mean, it was like such a great week, and everybody was just so pleasant and wonderful and international, and I just got taken care of and spoiled. I felt like, compared to most of my experiences.
Now, so I hope you're going to come back next year.
Next year is heavy toll. Like, I mean, it's all the way on the other side of the planet. I'm thinking 2 or 3 years. Like every 2 or 3 years, I can try to make a trek back. But I would love to. It's been absolutely perfect, and I really thank you for everything you've done for the community. opportunity. Thank you so much for continuing to work, and I do hope that I can see you out in our dust
Yeah.
at some point in the future.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Thank you, Mike.
All right,
Appreciate
thanks.
it.
Cheers.
You are now listening to the sounds of Rogue Fire from Paris, France, not Paris, Texas. This set was recorded during an epic sunset at the Cobra Cabana Art Piece and Dance Floor at Africa Burn 2019. Rogue Fire, also known as Maxime Huero, was actually not planning on attending Africa Burn this year, especially, but the team behind the Cobra Cabana, the amazing giant snake, we're going to link over to some photos of that on the notes if you haven't seen it, sent him like mock-ups of the art project and asked him to come play at their piece, and the project just looks so amazing that Max couldn't say no. And before he knew it, he was in South Africa. And I can attest that sunset was during a set was just absolutely insane. Rogue Fire has a ton of fire on his SoundCloud. You should absolutely go listen to more of him over at soundcloud.com/roguefire29. And you can also follow him at facebook.com/roguefire29. The 29 is the numbers. Please give us a like on Facebook and join the Facebook group and leave us a review on iTunes. The reviews do help the show grow and gain more support. All of these links are over at burnerpodcast.com. You can find me on all the social medias at Mr. Arash. That's MrArash. If you're sending me a friend request, please do shoot me a message so I know that you're not a spam bot. And do let me know if you have interesting interview subjects in your area. Maybe I'll come to your country, eat all your exotic cheese, and pass out on your bathroom floor after too much tequila. That may or may not have happened at Paul and Tamron's place. But hey, by the way, that's how I ended up in South Africa, because Paul and Tamron, Paul's a listener, and said, you should come out to South Africa. And so I did. Our producers are Lee Hemingway and Louis Galipeau, with additional support by Tori Massey and Navjit Sarna, and contributing producers of today's episode, Paul Cowan and Tamron Rademan, without whom this episode would not have happened. New episodes are up on the first and third Wednesdays-ish of the month. These days I'm either on shoots or off the grid a lot more often, so the schedule is a little bit more on burner time than it used to be, but we're getting the 2 episodes per month out. That's the bare minimum. The show is available on pretty much all the podcast platforms. If it's not on the one you really like, let us know. Our opening theme music, America's Horse with No Name Remix, is produced by Joman. Find him on soundcloud.com/DJ Joman, and I think he has a new album out. So until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Take us out, Rogue Fire.
Legs and limbs, millions of eyes, searching, pulling and devouring. Spark of fire, set it alight. until the day it was taken
But for a while it all made sense. It might have been just a dark pretense, but you had me, and I left it to be with you, to be the one, to live a life. It really got me all excited. I felt wanted. the earth. Changing face of the earth, tides washing away. Changing face of the earth, tides washing away all kinds of pain and everlasting rain. Thank you.
down to the river. There's a man I wanna see. Yeah, he's a ferryman. He'll recognize me. I'm going down now to the riverside. There's a place I wanna be. Gonna talk to the ferryman. He'll be expecting me. I'm crossing over now to the other side.
Everything will turn out
better there. On the other side, the grass is greener there. On the other side, and I'll get even there. On the other side, and everything will turn out alright. On the other side, on the other side, on the other side. Church house late last night. Yeah, I walked by the church house, but I didn't go inside. 'Cause I once slept with the preacher's wife. She handed me a ticket to the other side. I'm crossing over now to the other side. The other side. Last night, yeah, I walked by the church house, but I didn't go inside. 'Cause I once slept with the preacher's wife. She handed me a ticket to the other side. I'm crossing over now the other side. To the other side.
burnerpodcast.com.